What's going on, everybody? We are back. We got episode number 136 of the Club and Sub podcast. As usual, we got me, John, at MMA Fox, Lags at Danny_Lags. Tonight, we're going to be chatting UFC Vegas 74. Main event is Kai Kara France versus Amir Albazi. Honestly, I think it's a pretty good card for a fight night. There's, some compelling fights on here. Is it fireworks? Not necessarily. But I think there's a lot to talk about. I think there are some potentially good betting spots up and down the entire card here. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to get into it. There are some sketchier fight night cards that we've had this year, but I actually think this should be entertaining. Before we hop into it, though, we will chat last event real quick. Just go over our results. Lags, how'd you do last time out, 2 weeks ago?
Marginal profit, plus 0.11 units. Okay. So I guess we're just talking about the bets in general. So Fiallo over Buckley. Not a great bet in hindsight. Chase Hooper plus 115, a great bet in hindsight. So I had again another small sprinkle on Fiallo. KO won at 7-1. Had the under 2.5 rounds in Silva Leonardo for a unit at minus 140. She made that look fairly easy. And then I had a small play on Hooper inside the distance at plus 215 that could have cashed, but I mean, yeah, had chances. So yeah, small profit for me. And then hit the same game parlay for the boys, the fluffy same game parlay.
It was actually a pretty good night for me. I was up 4.01 units. I had Borshev for a unit that hit pretty easily. Carolina for a unit, it also hit pretty easily. Latifi, I don't know what your take is on that. I mean, I kind of felt like I would feel like I'd bet Latifi again at plus 170 though. Like that was a very close fight, more or less the way what I expected. I also had Hooper big, and Lags, I seem to recall somebody said on this podcast 2 weeks ago that people were making very big assumptions, assuming Nick Fiore was a better striker. Not going to say who it was, but someone did say that. That's all I'll say. I had a fight goes to decision in the Sato Garimbo fight, 1 unit plus 180. I took an L on the Ducote by decision, and then I had small pokes at De Silva round 2, round 3. And those both lost. But yeah, plus 4 units overall, profitable for both of us. It was nice to kind of get back on the winning track. Not much else to say about it. I was a little annoyed by the De Silva fight because I was like, come on, Leonardo, like, suck it up. Push her into the clinch. Like, cage push her here. Get me to round 2. Under was
that's why I like the under there.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, without further ado, we'll jump into this card. First fight of the night, we got Maxim Grishin. He's taking on Felipe Lynch. Grishin minus 128 currently. Comeback on Lynch plus 108. I believe this is a rebook, if I'm not mistaken.
It is.
Yeah, I don't really feel strongly about it. Kind of think the line's right. I understand some of the Lynch love just because Grishin is not a very inspiring fighter when you watch him. Like, he doesn't really do anything well. But by the same token, I feel like he doesn't really do anything poor either. Like, he's a fairly intelligent fighter. He's a decent grappler. He's a decent striker. He had a competitive kickboxing match with Dustin Jacoby. No one's really dominated him grappling in the UFC. So I look at this fight and say, I feel like Grishin's got a slight cardio edge. Striking's probably close. Grappling's probably close. Grishin's a bit more experienced. I feel like small favorite Grishin's probably fine, but not something I'm clamoring to get involved with in literally any way, shape, or form here. Lags, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, can't really echo you anymore. I mean, he's just way too wooden for me on the feet. I mean, he's by far the better striker, but the speed advantage, I think, for Linz is going to be there. But I expect to be fairly close on the feet, though. But, what you were talking about before we even started about this card, just this card being a better of the fight night cards, I don't know. I think it's just more sketchy. You've got a lot of sketchy fights, a lot of pullouts. I just think it's one of your average fight night cards, maybe below average.
Bro, have you seen some of the cards we've had this year,
I know.
Though?
And some of the ones we have coming up. Martian tweeted out about the Holly Holm one.
I will say this.
Yep.
I saw Gombas tweet this out, and I don't disagree with him. It's like, we can bitch about the quality of fight night cards, but would you rather go back to having 1 to 2 fight nights a month? Or would you rather have 45 cards a year where, sure, 20 to 30 of them suck, like on paper, but we're getting fights every week that we can bet on? And, people always talk about how shitty these low-level cards are, but the low-level cards are usually where all the finishes happen, So
that's true. I guess the only thing I would add, the only thing I would add on top of that, like I don't mind it from like a fan perspective, but from like a gambling perspective, a lot of these fights, some of them are just low level, some of them are just questionable. They're like, you're fine passing on them because we get betting opportunities every
Yeah, but
week.
Ian,
So
like,
it's
would
like,
you rather have us just doing this once a month, or like twice a
no,
month?
you're right. You're right.
Yeah. So
You're right.
that's all I'm saying. I feel like because the UFC's gotten a lot more popular, we've become very spoiled as fans.
That's fair. I mean, that's fair. Yeah.
Moving on though, Lou on Lacerda, he's taking on Damon Blackshear. Lacerda is a favorite at -148. Blackshear is the comeback at +128. I've got 2 units on Blackshear here. I've continued my streak of 3 straight events, not doing a great job reading the betting market and the line movement here. I think my average price is about +115 on here. Yeah, I think it's. I like Blackshear a fair amount. I look at the last fight from Lacerda, and I guess I get what people see in the Lacerda side of things, in that, he threw a lot of volume, was competitive with Stamen. Blackshear is 0-2 and has gotten grappled twice in these fights. Therefore, Lacerda should be the favorite. But I look at it, and I feel like the Stamen fight lacks a lot of context. Like, if you look at Lacerda's regional tape, the guy doesn't have much defense. We kind of saw that in the fight with in his last fight with Stamen, where Stamen was basically able to swing freely at his head, land very, very cleanly. And the only way Lacerda really got off offense in that fight was throwing body and leg kicks, over and over again. And Stamen you could see he wasn't comfortable being in the pocket. So he just was trying to get in and get out, but that kind of left him over those kicks. I feel like it's a very different dynamic here with Blackshear, where Blackshear, he's taller, he's longer than Lacerda is. I don't think Lacerda just throwing naked kicks is going to be an easy thing for him to get done here. And so I look at the striking, like I think Blackshear is going to land more head strikes. I think he'll be less vulnerable to the kicks. I make him a very slight favorite on the feet. And in the grappling, both guys can grapple, but you go back and watch Lacerda's tape and his regional tape, especially. This guy is a really, really shitty wrestler. And could he get Lacerda down once or twice? Probably, but I can't see him holding Blackshear down in this fight. So with that being the case, I can kind of see Blackshear holding Lacerda down. Given that he'll play guard. So yeah, I made Blackshear a small favorite here. I think the price is pretty good for him. I have 2 units. Lags, you take it away.
We were talking about this a little bit before we went live. It's just a weird one for me, just because I think Blackshear just finds himself like on his back so often, and finds himself playing guard more often than not. And like, I feel like on the feet, he is the better technical striker for sure, but Lacerda is the more damaging striker of the two. And I don't disagree with you at all with like if there is gonna be like large grappling, like top control, it's gonna be Blackshear. But just those moments of Blackshear just playing guard, accepting the bottom position, I just don't love it. So I just think it's a close-ish fight. Not passionate on the side for Blackshear.
Yeah, fair enough. Moving on, we got Jin Yu Fry taking on Elise Reed. Reed currently the favorite, -120. Fry the comeback +100. Any thoughts here?
Not really. I think people will say, "Oh, if Frey comes out here and grapples," but like, she really doesn't do it proactively, and so like, I think Reed probably can outvolume her on the feet. Again, not a passionate take. It's low level women's MMA, but yeah, I think Reed's slight fave. I get it.
I kind of lean the other way, but I don't really want to trust Jin Yu Fry to do what needs to be done. Like I bet Sam Hughes in a similar spot against Reed a year ago, and Fry's been training with Hughes. So theoretically, Fry can get done what she needs to get done here. I think if Fry grappled aggressively, like shot 4 to 10 takedowns, she'd probably get takedowns and likely hold her down. But is she really reliable to do that? Not really. And on the feet, yes, I think Fry is the better technical striker, but we just saw her get stiffed one fight ago, 4 or 5 months back with Polyana Viana. Reed actually hits decently hard. I would favor Reed to be busier and hit harder. And so I look at the fight and I see a lot of reasons to like Fry with the grappling upside, But we have a large sample of Jinyu Fry not doing very much minute to minute in these fights. So do I want to trust her? No. I'll tell you what I think is interesting. I saw Jinyu Fry submission at like plus 800, and just ITD generally, because I mean, tell me if you disagree, but I kind of feel like if Fry does look like the side here, it's probably means she's getting on top of Reed and getting a ton of top time. And if that's the case, I mean, her finishing props are all way off. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. What was the sub prop again you said?
I saw plus 800 earlier, which I think is pretty interesting.
I
And
feel
just
like
in
that's
general,
pretty,
ITD.
I mean, I get that, but I feel like it's pretty accurate based off of her willingness to grapple. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe. I
I
mean,
guess that's fair enough.
yeah.
Fair enough. Moving on, we got Jamie Malarkey taking on Muhammadjan Naimov. Malarkey minus 385, Naimov plus 320. Lags, what are your thoughts here?
I actually think this got moved up, first of all.
What do you
So I
mean it got
think
moved up?
I think the Santos Munoz fight is the 4th fight, according to Tapology.
You are right. I was just looking.
And I believe the Malarkey fight is the 8th fight.
All right, Daniel Santos, Johnny Munoz Jr. Since you're going to cut me off and tell me it got moved up, you can take it away here. Santos, Johnny Munoz.
So I do have a play on this fight, though. I do have the under 2.5 rounds minus 135 for a unit and a half. I think Santos cooks him eventually on the feet. I don't like Munoz's wrestling. I don't think it's anything special. I think the stand up, I think the pace, the pressure of Santos on the feet, I think he wears him down. I think he knocks him out. So I like the under.
Yeah. I don't have any strong feelings here. I was interested in betting Santos like minus 150. Didn't get it in last time. Line this time. I guess there was a line error on Bet Online, but I'm in New Jersey and I did not have the opportunity to hit that because I can't get Bet Online here. Yeah, I think the line's about right. I just don't really see if Munoz gets him down. I think Munoz's jiu-jitsu is slick enough that he could potentially get to dominant positions and potentially sub him here. But I don't think Munoz is going to have an easy time getting him down. Like we'll talk about Castaneda shortly, but Castaneda is a pretty good wrestler and he struggled to grapple Daniel Santos. You know, we saw Daniel Santos grapple Kalimov over in, I think it was ACA at the time, a couple years back. And said, look, you can get him down, but he's got a good get-up game. He's got pretty good takedown defense. And the standing gap between the two, like maybe you could make a technical argument for Munoz's boxing, but he's low output. He's very wooden. He's very easy to hit. And Santos just brings a pace. Yeah, I think Munoz is very grappling reliant. I just think it's going to be hard for him to get it there. What did you say the under is right now, Lex?
I think for the most part, it's like minus 150.
It's not horrible.
So
I do think a lot of Santos's win equity is likely tied to finish. And Munoz, frankly, like I'd be kind of surprised if they just bang it outstanding for 15 minutes and it makes the cards. So it's not a bad look. Moving on though, we got Andre Arlovsky, Dante Mays. I took a small piece of Mays early at dog. I'm probably going to flip out of it though. I don't really. I mean, look, I bet Mays big against Hamdi, and then I bet him again against Sakai in his last fight. I am not really chomping at the bit to lose 3 straight bets on someone like Dante Mays. My broad thinking is, though, that he should be a small favorite, and the current line is right-ish, primarily just because, look, I mean, on this podcast, we've been betting Arlovsky for years. You know, the guy's consistently been undervalued, but the truth is, in this spot, it's like he's now 44. You know, one of these next couple fights, he's going to go over the cliff. It's going to happen. He's giving up a decent height and reach advantage here. Something that's concerned me pretty significantly on the Arlovsky side is the last 2 times he's gotten grounded, he's just flat out quit. You know, both Aspinall and De Lima are decent grapplers, but both of them, you know, were able to sub him with 1 hook in. So it just seemed like he quit in those fights. And Mays has been more proactive lately about wrestling. And so it's like, I think he's got decent upside on the mat here. Of the 2, I think he has far more finishing upside. I kind of look at it like, yeah, Arlovsky could do what Arlovsky does and win a close decision like he always seems to do. But I don't see much in the way of upside past that, whereas his potential floor here is massive. So to me, you know, just on the uncertainties alone in this fight, I think you have to make Mays the favorite. What do you think, Lex?
So I know we were disagreeing about this a little bit before too. I I guess I would disagree on the fact that I just don't think his floor isn't as low because I don't think Mays is going to proactively grapple as much as you do. So I do think
I'm
it's one
not
of
sure
your
he will.
true. So yeah, so I kind of think it is one of your classic Arlovsky fights, probably a close decision. And I think he can weasel that 100% because this is a guy who's had 50 plus fights. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
don't
I lean
like if you
Arlovsky way.
told me, like I said, I'm gonna flip my ticket, but like if you told me Mays was going to attempt like 6+ takedowns, I would happily keep the ticket here. I'm with you. Dante Mays is not a very bright fighter.
But then I would
So
ask you this: so what is the percentage of him shooting 6+ takedowns? You know,
I probably not great. He did
they're not
get
high at
6
all. You
against
know,
Parisian though. In not that recent past. But I was hoping he would do that to Sakai, and he seemed to get intimidated very fast in that fight and just kind of go
I mean,
south from there.
he's a big guy. Sakai's
He
pretty like
is.
just intimidating guy, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not super passionate about it, but I personally lean to the Mays side. Moving on, John Castaneda, Muin Gaffarov. Lags, any thoughts here?
One I'm definitely not passionate on because of the short notice nature. But I mean, I don't mind Gaffarov's like his pace and his wrestling. I don't like his striking. Like it seems very one and done. A lot of spinning shit. I don't think his cardio is great. So like, I think the line like right now, Castaneda slight fave. I think it's fine. Honestly, like, I don't have any issues with it.
Yeah, I might bet Castaneda here. Just primarily because, like you said, I think Gaffarov striking it's very loopy, it's very wide. Like he throws heat in his shots, but I feel like he's very open by anybody remotely technical to get cracked. Like on the feet, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a similar look to Santos versus Castaneda. The big difference is I don't think Gaffarov's capable of pushing the pace Santos did. In the grappling, yeah, Gaffarov's a good wrestler. I'd be a bit surprised if he holds Santos down here, though. Or not Santos, sorry, Castaneda. Would be surprising to me. So I look at it. I feel like Castaneda's got a striking edge. I think he can probably counter grapple reasonably effectively. He's got a bit more high-level experience than Gaffarov does. It's very short notice, as you mentioned. And I actually there's a big cardio gap. Like I know Castaneda gassed out in his last fight, but two things. One, he apparently had bronchitis going into that fight. Number two, the pace that Daniel Santos brought in that fight was outrageous. It's like not only did he bring a pace, but Castaneda used all his energy, like almost murdering him like 3 times in the first 7 minutes of that fight before, he finally succumbed to it. Yeah, I think it's a tough hill to climb here for Gaffarov. I feel like the price minus 180-ish, 170 would be a bit more fair on the Castaneda side of things, especially off a full camp. Yeah, I lean Castaneda, probably going to bet him, but it looks like the line keeps coming in. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of Castaneda interest out there. So we'll see where it ends up closing. Moving on, Zaleski dos Santos taking on Abubakar Nurmagomedov. This is a minus 110 aside. In another lifetime or in another year, I'd have bet Zaleski here in a heartbeat. I do kind of think he's maybe getting underrated a bit by the market here just because, I mean, no one has really come out there and mauled Zaleski grappling like in his career, really. I don't think, Abubakar's a good wrestler, but I don't think he's, like this elite, like terror on the mat who's really a danger to come out and hold Zaleski down for 12 minutes. I'd be a bit surprised by that. So I think they're going to strike for large portions of this fight. I actually think Abubakar's a decent striker, but I mean, Zaleski's just got much more high-level experience. The thing is, he's 36 years old. He's coming off a steroid suspension. That is pretty concerning to me. It's like, again, it's like kind of like how I feel about Arlovsky. Obviously, he's not 44, but like off that kind of a dynamic where you're off a PED suspension and you're old, the floor on Zaleski could be really, really low here. I don't see many scenarios where Abubakar doesn't compete, whereas I can imagine scenarios where Zaleski just looks like a washed old man and gets washed out. So, I mean, given that, I just feel like there's a lot more upside on the Abubakar side than the Zaleski side. So I'm happy to pass it. I couldn't bet Abubakar just because I do think, betting steps up in competition like this is just generally minus EV, especially at Pick'em. What do you think, Legs?
Yeah, I mean, I think you broke it down perfectly in the beginning there. If this was another year, I'd be betting Zaleski, but like with the age, with the PED suspension, I mean, Plus, not to mention, like on the feet, while he definitely is the better striker, 100%. He's a lot of like this big, like we were talking about before, a lot of this big actions, this and that, spinning shit, which could get himself taken down. So, I mean, it's just a lot of question marks on the Zaleski side. So I'm happy to pass it, Beckham. But if the line keeps ballooning out and we get plus money on Zaleski, I get it.
And I kind of feel like Abubakar striking is maybe getting a little underrated because he's like a Russian known for being a wrestler. Like his striking looked, not that Jared Gooden is anything special, but his striking looked very good against Jared Gooden. I wouldn't be shocked to see him hang on the feet, especially if there's a decline on the Zaleski side.
What I will say, though, is I feel like he's getting just a lot of credit for the last fight with Gadsy. And Gadsy just kind of accepted bottom a little bit. I don't think he's great in general either. So, yeah. We'll see.
Yeah, fair enough. Moving on, we got Korean Silva. Oh, no, we have Jamie Malarkey taking on Muhammad John Nemov. This time I'm going to get it. Malarkey, big favorite here. He's minus 385. Nemov plus 320. What are your thoughts?
Well, it didn't matter if we talked about it in the third position or the eighth position now, because I think it's a pretty great matchup for Malarkey. This guy doesn't have much takedown defense, in my opinion. I think Malarkey, if he goes to the grappling pretty heavily, I think he could wear him out. I think he could find a finish. I think the cardio is pretty big. There's a pretty big gap in the cardio. Malarkey's a better striker here too. I think price more than justified.
I more or less agree. I think the one area where I maybe think Nemov could compete is Jamie does. I mean, he is very hittable. We've seen Malarkey get hurt a number of times. And I do think Nemov, especially early, is very, very dangerous. So if you tell me like he comes out here and cracks Malarkey early in this fight, am I blown away? No. But I agree with you. I think, Malarkey's got a clear path if he pushes the grappling hard here. Even standing, I suspect the pace that Malarkey brings is going to probably break Nemov the longer this fight goes. Plus, I mean, Malarkey's a giant. And Nemov's just kind of like average size for the division. And yeah, I mean, Nemov doesn't have the best cardio at the best of times. And now he's coming in here on 3 days' notice to fight Malarkey off a full training camp, training for Guram. It just seems
class.
Like up a weight class. Yeah,
this is 155. Yep.
It seems like he's up against it here. I feel, again, if he cracked Malarkey early, would I be shocked? No, I think he's got decent striking tools, but he's just had so many deficiencies in this fight and just generally in the UFC. With being a striker with the kind of gas tank he has is just kind of problematic. So I think Malarkey handles business. Honestly, ideally, Nemov maybe stunning him and winning round one would be great, and we could get in like a decent live price, even if it's like minus 150 on the Malarkey side. But I don't know if it'll be available. Feels like the market's wising up to a lot of these, cardio spots live.
If there's a decent under 2.5, then maybe I'll be after it. But I don't really expect it to be because I know I've some buyers are more. So I was on the Malarkey Prado under 2.5, and that was around minus 160. So I expect something somewhat similar.
Moving on. Korean Silva, Ketlin Souza. Silva minus 225. Come back on Souza plus 190. What are your thoughts here?
I think it should be a good fight for Silva. Honestly, like I don't rate Souza that much. Honestly, I don't really get why she's getting the shot. Honestly, like I don't know. I don't have a ton of thoughts on this fight. I think Silva should be fine.
Yeah, I mean Silva's got Souza's got a good record, but it's like her best win is Christina Williams. Like she hasn't fought like
who out grappled her for moments of that
large.
fight.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like Souza's hasn't really fought any kind of reasonable competition. She has a good record, but I mean she's beating Invicta cans. Like she's not even getting any of the higher level Invicta women or fighting on contenders. So I've been looking to fade Korean Silva because I think there are a lot of elements of her game that are potentially suspect. I don't trust her striking. I don't trust her cardio. I don't trust her defensive wrestling. But I give credit where it's due. Silva's got a somewhat slick jiu-jitsu game. Obviously, she's got some pop for a woman. And look, she's beat a decent strength of schedule for someone who's only had one fight in the UFC. I'm with you. I don't really think Souza is cut out for this level, in my opinion. I think Silva probably has this fight everywhere, but in particular, I think if she gets her down, she's going to probably wipe her. So yeah, I'm not advocating laying minus 225 on Korean Silva, but I'm also not advocating going, yeah,
But what is interesting though is the under 2.5. I think is around pick'em.
I don't think Silva's ever been to a decision, if I'm not mistaken, or has ever won a decision. I think she's got a 100% finish rate. Yeah, Silva has a 100% finish rate. That is actually pretty interesting. That is pretty interesting.
So the under 2.5 is minus 110 out there, minus 120s.
Not financial advice, but food for thought. Moving on, though. Good fight here. Tim Elliott, Victor Altamirano. I got a decent amount of money on Tim at some early prices, like minus 140 range, I think. I think 2 units, or to win 2 units I have here. I actually still think you could make an argument there's value here. Obviously, the big question with Tim, I'm not even going to say I think the big question is what happened with his wife and everything. I'm not really worried about that, honestly, in the context of this fight.
Yeah.
Tim Elliott's Tim Elliott. He's going to fight how he fights. I don't worry too much about, how his personal life bleeding over. What I do worry about is he's 36 years old, and I initially was going to pass because I'd already had an ACL surgery, but apparently the screws in his previously repaired ACL just came loose. It's not like he actually retore the ACL or anything like that. So, looking at the fight itself, I just feel like this is a great fight for Elliott historically. Victor's he's an okay prospect, throws okay output, kind of a funky striking style, but his defense isn't great, and his defensive wrestling is pretty poor, if we're being honest. He gets taken down fairly easily. When he gets put on his back, he tends to just sit there and play guard. And that seems like a nightmare against someone like Elliott. If you go through the majority of Tim Elliott's career, he has made a career out of absolutely chewing up guys like Victor Altamirano. The one exception is Brandon Royval, but I would argue the difference between Royval and Altamirano is, number one, Royval is a top 5 fighter in, flyweight. Number 2, he's much more dangerous and much more aggressive. He keeps the pace going. But you go back, look at the Louis Smolka fight. Elliott gets on top of him, absolutely mauls him. The Mark De La Rosa fight, the Jordan Espinosa fight. Guys who try to sit and guard against Elliott historically, he has just completely mauled. He's a very good wrestler. He is a funky top game in that it's not very positionally sound. But if you open up the positions to him, he'll take dominant positions. He's got a decent submission game himself. I look at the fight, and to me, it's is Victor going to be the first guy to ever knock out Tim Elliott? Or the second guy. I guess he got knocked out early in his career. But, that would be surprising to me because Victor doesn't really have many KOs in his career either. Could he sub him? Yeah, he could. Tim's been subbed before. We all know that. But I feel like it's not, I don't think it's more likely than Elliott subbing him, to be honest. You look at these guys, Victor come into the UFC, and have any of the guys he's beaten been UFC level? Daniel Lacerda, Benicio Salvador, Carlos Hernandez is you go back to contenders, he should have lost it. And basically Carlos Candelario came out here, took him down over and over again, and owned most of that fight. You go back to the Lloyd McKinney fight in LFA where he got dominated for 8 minutes and caught him with a triangle off basically a referee mistake. I don't know. I feel like this fight stylistically is perfectly tailored for Elliott. I trust Elliott more. He's far more experienced. He's fought way better guys. Historically, when Tim Elliott steps down in competition, he absolutely rolls. And I've seen Victor look really bad against guys who are worse at Tim Elliott at implementing the game plan he's going to implement here. It's I think Elliott should be minus 200. Some concern about his age, but until I see him go off a cliff, I'm in Tim I trust. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good fight for Tim. I think at those early prices, I definitely would have been involved too. I think where the line's at now is fine. I think it should be a good fight for him. I expect him to be busier on the feet. I expect him, like you said, I expect him to have takedowns. Again, I don't just rate Victor highly at all. I feel like a lot of people are just saying, oh, he's got, punching power and this and that. I feel like it's a lot of just assumption, or not assumption, just taking away from that Lacerda fight, the last fight, where it's he's not really that good. He's a one round fighter. So dominating him, finishing him how he did. All right. I don't rate that highly. So yeah, I think it should be good.
People were dying to bet Salvador against Victor and Hernandez. And now it's they're dying to bet Victor against Tim Elliott. What are we doing?
Yeah.
We'll see, but I really liked him here. Moving on, interesting fight. Jim Miller, Jared Gordon. Fucking weird booking, if we're being completely honest. The line here, Gordon minus 187, Miller plus 162. And candidly, if Jared Gordon hadn't basically gotten KO'd a month ago by Bobby Green's head, I would bet him here at this number. Like on paper, I think it's a very good fight for Jared Gordon. You know, very good cardio fighter, solid wrestler, good defensive jiu-jitsu, pretty much a nightmare for this stage of Jim Miller's career. You know, I would always expect Miller to have solid success early, but I think Gordon in most iterations of this fight breaks Miller down the stretch. Or if he just comes out and wrestles, Miller only defends takedowns at 40% for his career and plays guard. And as I mentioned, you know, Gordon's a down here guy. It's very unlikely he gets subbed from bottom by Jim Miller. So I think Gordon has tools to be like minus 400 in this fight. The problem is, Jim Miller is going to have a good round early. And he does crack a bit for an old guy. And Jared Gordon didn't just get like stopped. Like he got absolutely put out cold. Now, yes, was it an illegal headbutt? Yes. But it doesn't change the fact that he got put out cold like a month ago. You know, like that is, I saw some people trying to make that distinction. And it's like, I don't care how the fight was ruled. I care that he was flat out cold on the canvas. You know, I don't know how he's going to respond to that. And it's not like Jared was like, I always thought his chinniness was overrated, but it's not like he was the most durable guy to begin with, you know? So that's a concern for me. If it got down to like minus 150, I'd probably take the poke on Gordon just because I think the upside alone, if he approaches this right, is very, very high. But man, so many concerns on that side, you know, just given the dynamic and background here. What do you think, Legs?
I think that's really the only talking point you can have about this fight. Like, I'm not even concerned about the round one Jim Miller. Like, I'm just concerned about the fact that Gordon just got headbutted not that long ago. So, I mean, again, agree with you. Should be a good fight for Gordon on the feet. Can land takedowns. Should be no issue. Much better cardio than Jim Miller. Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean,
everything on paper says bet Jared Gordon at minus 185 against Jim Miller. Except if you bet him at minus 185 and he dies to a half-strength jab, like a minute into the fight, you're going to be want to kill yourself. Yeah.
Headbutt that leads to a sub.
Yep. I honestly, it's funny because like I thought about betting over because over is like almost pick. And
I thought it was like minus 155 over 2.5.
Is it up to that? It was minus 120 when I looked at it earlier in the week.
Yeah.
What is it? Yeah, you're right. It's up to minus 145. It's about the best price available. But if I'm going to bet the over, I'd rather just have the Gordon money line because I really think if it goes the distance, Gordon is probably going to win fairly easily. And at least in that case, I have the upside in case Gordon does finish a pretty old Jim Miller, which could happen. You never know. But yeah, I mean, I don't really want to steer into the fire here. So
I would be interested to see what DraftKings has for the Gordon and the over 1.5 rounds.
Yeah. That would be interesting. But also it's like you're almost steering into the same dynamic though, you know? But yeah, I mean, if you got a decent enough like SGP out of it, it might not be bad. Moving on though, Alex Caceres taking on Daniel Pineda. Caceres minus 180, come back on Pineda plus 155. I'll throw it to you first. What do you think?
Well, what I will say first, because we were just talking about that last fight, and I wouldn't play this. That what we were just talking about the Gordon and the over 1.5 rounds is minus 150.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Not
No. I find this fight somewhat similar to the Elliott fight in the sense that like Caceres is a janky guy at juice. You don't really want to lay it, but I think it's another good stylistic matchup for him. I know a lot of people talk about Pineda's last fight, clearly on the juice, 100%. And looked great doing it. Had a great finish. But before that, I mean, this guy's cardio looks like shit after like 7.5 minutes. I mean, I think Caceres, honestly, if he keeps his standing, can find a finish. Caceres is open enough himself on the feet that he could get finished early. If this hits a mat, I think either guy's live for finish. I like the under 2.5 at like pick.
I also like the under here, and I'll likely be playing it. I'm kind of tempted to bet Caceres, but minus 180 is kind of getting to the point where I don't really want to get involved. It like touched minus 150 for like 1 second and then rocketed back up. But I do think this is like a fairly big overcorrection off Pineda's last fight. Like one fight ago, he was almost plus 300 against Tucker fucking Lutz. Like Alex Caceres is a much better MMA fighter than Tucker Lutz is. And now because he dominated Tucker Lutz, who was also injured for that fight, Pineda is now, or Caceres is only minus 180 here. Like that, it just seems like a big overcorrection given historically Pineda's cardio is terrible. And I'll say this, his cardio looked a little better last fight, but one, he didn't get very much resistance in that fight. Number two, we see this all the time in MMA where guys will have a one-off cardio performance. The majority of Pineda's career says his cardio is absolute dog shit. I don't think because one fight ago, at 37 years of age, that we can make the assumption that suddenly Daniel Pineda has got good cardio to fight an extended fight here. It feels like a drastic assumption to me. With that said, I mean, I guess he has the tools to give Caceres problems early, right? He can grapple very well early in fights. But even that, I feel as if Caceres' defensive grappling has been underrated, like perpetually since his fight with Kron Gracie. He gave up the standing back take, got subbed. That was it. And then he went to be a huge dog to Chase Hooper. Was it closely lined with Steven Peterson and Kevin Kroom? People don't realize, like, yeah, he got memed by an elite black belt. It's not the end of the world. I feel as if Pineda coming out and just dominating him and mauling him on the mat is probably not going to happen. Like maybe he could hold him down for a round, but even that I'm kind of skeptical of. And we're not that far removed, for your point, from 2 fights ago, him looking like an absolute corpse against Andre Fili, like looked like he didn't want to be there, got poked in the eye a minute into round 2 and just quit. I don't know. I feel like the market's putting too much stock in Pineda's last performance here. But yeah, again, I'm passing that. I like the under. I'm with you. I think Caceres probably finishes him if the fight gets extended. His output's high enough that I'd expect him to kind of put it on him. And yeah, I mean, if Pineda's going to win the fight, it's probably going to be early, right? I'd be very surprised by Pineda top clinic for 3 rounds.
No.
Yeah, so that would surprise me. I lean the Caceres side, though. I sort of have a feeling that we're all going to be like on Saturday night, be like, oh man, Caceres was huge value. Why didn't we see this here? But
am I going to was huge value, and the under was huge value,
or that? And I'm not going to be ever upset at myself for not laying juice on Alex Caceres. So
right, that's another thing too. Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, I lean that side. Moving on, main event: Kai Kara France taking on Amir Albazi. I love Kai here. I have a fairly big bet on him. I'm going to probably arb some of it off, but I have mostly a dog money. But I think the line of minus 110 is fine as well. Feel like Albazi is. I'm not saying he's bad. I don't think that, but I think he's really getting a lot of credit for not doing that much impressive and that many impressive things. You know, his UFC run is submitting Malcolm Gordon in the first round, who's really not UFC level, winning a close decision against Zhalgas Zhumagulov, who, look, Zhalgas is solid. He's a very, very average fighter, but the guy's like 2-5 in the UFC, not by accident. You know, he just doesn't differentiate himself anywhere, and he's got poor cardio. And then after that, he beat Francisco Figueiredo in round 1. Again, not a UFC level fighter. Took on Alessandro Costa on short notice. Again, not a UFC level fighter, who beat him in round 1 of that fight. And then prior to that, the only other decent competition he fought was Jose Shorty Torres, who was not a very good UFC fighter, and Torres broke him. He won the first round of that fight and then completely collapsed down the stretch of it and ended up getting grappled by Torres late in that fight. And so, like, I feel like there's a lot of assumptions here that, like, yeah, Albazi's this top-tier elite grappler. And I'll grant you, I think his jiu-jitsu is very, very good. But I don't think he's the best wrestler ever. He tends to shoot from very far out. I don't think he chains takedowns particularly well. He keeps an okay output on the feet, but his striking's very wooden. He's very, very easy to hit, especially if you extend combinations with him. He doesn't deal great. I haven't seen, or I should say he doesn't deal great with them, but I haven't seen this guy take low kicks yet. And now he's facing Kai Kara France, who Kai Kara France has 3 losses in the UFC. 2 of them were both close fights and competitive fights with Brandon Moreno, the current champion. And one of them was Brandon Royval in what was an absolute firefight. And Royval just did Royval things. Other than that, Kara France has won most of his UFC fights fairly solidly, unless you want to go back to like the Howley and Paiva fight a few years ago. But look, Kara France is an excellent defensive wrestler. He on the feet, yeah, he can struggle a bit if he gets overly pressured. And I guess that's the argument for Albazi. I guess where I would disagree with that is Albazi hasn't really faced a dangerous power threat coming back at him. And that tends to mitigate the ability of fighters to pressure, especially if their defense isn't great like Albazi's is. Like you saw him cede the center pretty willingly to Shorty Torres early in that fight. And if Albazi can't stay on him and keep him in a phone booth in the manner Moreno did this whole fight, I think Cara France can pick his shots and pick him apart here. Honestly, like he's the cleaner striker. I think he's got much better defense. He's going to throw low kicks. Can Albazi get back takes or submit him? Yeah. But I also feel like even that is having too much stock put into it. Like Bontarine basically body slammed him from a body lock and jumped into a back take from that. And Askarov kind of worked to one, but I don't think that's indicative of him being this guy who just automatically gives his back. You look at most of the takedowns he's suffered in the UFC, he works back up pretty much right away. He's got great hips. And given how Albazi's cardio looked in the Torres fight, like I'm not in a 5-round fight. I'd be a little surprised if Albazi comes out here and like goes full Marab and attempts 15, 20 takedowns. He's probably going to attempt 5 to 10. I feel like you can't really project him to get more than a couple in this fight. So it's like, unless you think he's getting back takes and or subbing off that, I think they're going to spend most of the time on the feet. And I just think Cara France is a much better striker. I think he's a more dangerous striker. He's a much more experienced fighter who's fought much better competition. To me, this is a huge overcorrection on Albazi due to the competition he's fought, and people aren't paying attention to the fact that he hasn't really fought a quality fighter in the UFC yet. Now he's fighting a top 5 guy, and he's being lined to pick. Doesn't make much sense to me. I think Cara France, like minus 150, makes sense here. I lean in fairly strongly. What do you think, Lags?
So I'm with you on the Cara France side, but not as passionately enough on a play, just because I do rate Albazi's grappling. I do rate the wrestling.
It is good, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, my thing is, in the first round, I do think Kai's going to give him issues, but I think as the fight wears on, I do think that Albazi can get the takedowns. And not that saying, like, it's some massive cardio by any means, but I don't think Kai has great cardio either. So I feel like it's, if anything, neutral, and I think Albazi's probably just going to keep pushing the wrestling pace, and I think he can get the back takes. I mean, you saw Bontarine hold it in for like 2.5, 3 minutes, so he's much bigger, 100%. And I, in my opinion, I would say a better grappler while he's fresh, but.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree that he could get back takes. I feel like it's really tough to get Kai down off single shots, and he's going to have to work really hard to chain takedowns, and I just don't think he's great at that. He could get a standing back takes, though. I mean, we saw him do it to Torres. He's done it to a couple guys. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, I think there's a lot of reason based on the tape to like the Kai side. And honestly, the macro here, like Kai coming off a loss, having fought the level of competition he's fought against a guy in Albazi who has really fought quite poor competition. To me, that in and of itself makes the line kind of a little wonky.
Plus the 5-round nature of it too, adding on.
Yeah. And I will say, look, Cara France has slowed down in fights before, but like his last fight against Moreno, he was having his best round of the fight in round 3, right before he got finished, before he hit the liver kick. So
that's fair.
I don't know. I mean, we've seen Albazi slow down. He completely collapsed at the end of the Torres fight. And granted, the fight was 4 years ago. He certainly could have cleaned that issue up, but we don't know. We really don't. So we'll see what happens. I like the Kai side. Interesting card. I'm looking forward to it. Guys, as always, we'll be back next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. As always, you can find me on Twitter, John at MMA Fox, Lags at Danny_Lags. You guys ever want to hit us up or anything, chat fights, we're always down. If you like the show, please drop a like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. And yeah, good luck on your bets this weekend, everybody. Hopefully we all cash. We'll see you back here next week to talk pay-per-view. We got another Amanda Nunes headliner, but we also got Charles Oliveira and Beneil Dariush. So that'll be exciting to talk about. Any last words, Lags?
War Tim.
It
is Tim fight week. Yes.
It is Tim Elliott fight week. Peace, everybody. Have a good one.